What is going on, guys? So, well, this video is going to be a bit different. So before you read too much into what's going on with my UI here, let me holla at you real quick. So this video is going to be about something new going on with Windows. Yes, you heard that right, with Windows. Um, it's something I've been wanting to try out for a little bit since I heard that it was going to be a thing. No, I am not abandoning Linux, so don't worry about that. This is still going to be a Linux first channel, but this is a tech channel also, and I think this is something interesting to talk about, and especially in my particular use case as a home theater PC user. Um, and the real thing that kind of like made me go off on this tangent finally was the 580 drivers have broken one of my favorite games on Linux. Which will hopefully be resolved in the next driver update. But so I have gone back to dual booting Windows Windows 11, unfortunately. But the benefit of that is that I finally get to try this out and give you my thoughts on this, on what it means for handheld gaming on Windows and um, home theater PCs in particular on Windows, and kind of like further ruminations on um, how this all plays together into into Linux in these same situations. So you may have heard about the Xbox ROG Ally and the Xbox ROG Ally X. God, it's a mouthful. Um, these are two new handhelds that just recently came out, very recently, and Windows, Microsoft, and Xbox have finally done some serious collaboration for the first time ever. Um, and they have made what they call the Xbox Fullscreen experience, which they created for these handhelds. Um, of course, this Xbox Fullscreen experience is going to be rolling out to other Windows handhelds, and presumably desktop PCs, or I should say standard PCs. They're saying early next year. Um, but an enterprising and advanced user such as myself can get a hold of this right now with the proper steps. It is still obviously this is still very much like experimental software. Um, it's not even like released on other handhelds. It's barely been released for prime time on the devices it was created for. And it certainly is in the very, very early preliminary stages of support for desktop PCs or anything like that. So it's a big ordeal even trying to get this up and running on a desktop. You gotta edit the registry and um, use VivaTool to enable the features, and you got to edit the registry, and then you got to use FizzaPanel to all basically to trick Windows into thinking you're playing on a handheld device, so it'll give you access to this. And then on top of all that, you also need to be in the Windows Insider program and basically be running a beta version of Windows to even start to have access to it. So bearing all that in mind, this is highly, highly experimental. It is very much very early stages, and this probably won't be generally available to just anybody who wants to pop it on at a whim on Windows for quite some time. Um, if you guys want to see a guide on how to set this up, let me know. There's really not a lot of good guides. There's good guides on how to set it up on a handheld, but there's extra steps you need to do if you want to get this running on a desktop. And there's not really a lot of good coverage about that. I was up until like 2 in the morning a day, like a couple nights ago, trying to get this done, um, which I did, obviously. Didn't get to do much gaming on it though. Um, but yeah, so let's dig in. So, as you can see here, I've got OBS running. I've also got my internet browser, Florp over here, running YouTube Music. Now this is what you boot into. Now this Xbox full screen experience is essentially Microsoft's answer to SteamOS and GameScope session and all that. Trying to keep people on Windows and blah blah blah. And as much as I dislike Windows, I actually do kind of like this. It's not bad for for Windows. Obviously, it's a glorified Xbox UI essentially. But the cool thing about it is that you do boot into this, and it doesn't boot the desktop environment, and it doesn't boot like a bunch of other things that come with the desktop environment by default. So you boot into this, and really all you're running is like what you launch from this. They do have Steam integration and Epic integration and GOG integration. So even though it's obviously centered on the Xbox side of things, me as a Steam gamer, I've had no problems getting Steam integrated with this and getting my Steam library, in here and all that stuff. It all just pretty much works. And then if you hit I use an 8-bit Do Ultimate controller for my controller, my primary controller, I should say, on PC, and it works flawlessly with the UI here. I mean, the controller is typically identified as an Xbox controller by Steam and other things, so I imagine that's probably why it's probably being picked up as an Xbox controller. DualSense does work with this. I did because my backup controller, and that I use for second players and stuff, is actually a PlayStation controller, a DualSense controller, and I did test out to see if the DualSense would work, and the DualSense does kind of work. I say kind of because as far as navigating the UI and stuff, you can do that just fine, but the PlayStation button does not fulfill the functions of the Xbox button or the home button on my 8-bit Do controller does. So it just basically does nothing. So you can't access the game bar, you can't do the alt tab thing. So there's definitely gonna have to be some kind of workaround implemented for that, hopefully. Of course, this is Xbox centric, so it's entirely possible that they'll just basically tell you to go fuck yourself, essentially, as far as DualSense support goes. So yeah, there's no real problems here. It's a little glitchy at times, but like I said, this is still very early stages. I didn't expect it to be a 100% maximum polish situation. It is interesting for sure. It kind of reiterates to me the need for Valve, and and everybody likes to say, oh well, it's Nvidia's fault. Nvidia doesn't work well with GameScope, and that's on Nvidia. They need to fix it. And I get that argument, but it's a two-way street. Nvidia needs to put in work to fix their problems with GameScope session, but GameScope session could also meet them in the middle on being more compatible with their drivers and stuff. The bottom line is GameScope session was built from the ground up for AMD hardware. And that's why it has so many problems with Nvidia on Linux, is because it wasn't really designed with Nvidia in mind at all. GameScope Session was originally created by Valve for the Steam Deck and for the Steam Deck's AMD hardware. And they didn't put much care into making sure that it would be, something that would work on NVIDIA. Um, so, like, I get the argument that NVIDIA needs to get their shit together, but in my mind, like, the development behind GameScope Session can also move in a direction that's going to help speed along that process. But as it currently stands, NVIDIA, while the NVIDIA drivers on Linux have improved very significantly, and I'm very excited for the DX12 performance fix that's, hopefully going to be coming out with the next driver. Going to be coming out with the next major driver release. Um, they do got to get that party going to the point where you can have your game scope session and everything going, because that's what a lot of people are looking for. That's what drew me to Linux in the first place. And like, granted, like this is Windows, right? Like Windows still creeps in, and I've come to realize over the past couple days of messing with this that one of the reasons I like it so much is because it feels less like Windows, and it feels more like an actual console experience. So it makes the console gamer in me happy. But at the same time, the Linux user that I've become and stuff like that, like, chafes against a lot of this stuff. Um, just being in Windows again and like not being able to set keyboard shortcuts because I need power tools because Windows doesn't have a built-in option to set keyboard shortcuts. Just like, oh, why? Just why? But don't worry, I'm not gonna be staying here long. I just really wanted to try this out, see how it was. It's good to see how the other side lives from time to time. Don't want to get too biased, you know what I mean? Um, Probably gonna be going back to Arch whenever I get annoyed enough with this, or right now I am enjoying the simplicity of it and not having to worry about dealing with what, having just a console like PC, which I'm going to get bored of, but at the same time it's also kind of nice to just like have my PC games and just not have to worry about tinkering with anything, and just hey, I boot up my fucking PC. Like, it's literally, I boot my PC up right now and it's like, it feels like a console. Like, in a way that I've only seen, on my ROG Ally X running, GameScope Session. And this is huge for like, like, let's be real here. This is a huge step for Microsoft, and I guess it really just kind of shows how seriously Microsoft is taking, what Linux brings to the table. Because this is like the biggest. This is the biggest thing that that Microsoft has done for like gamers on PC, maybe ever. Like, they came out with their little game mode for Windows a while back, with Windows 11, and it was a joke. It doesn't really do anything, and in some cases it can actually hurt your performance, from what I've heard. Rather than help it, which is the total opposite of what it's supposed to do. So, it's nice to kind of have this mode where you can be on Windows and you can just... I can definitely see a lot of people enjoying this. I hope they, fast track this stuff for other handhelds and other PCs, because as it currently stands, like, I've heard there's a tool you can use now, but There's a lot of manual configuration that goes into this currently to get this set up. It's pretty complicated. Being a Linux user familiar with command line stuff definitely helped me in this process. But I could see like a total Windows normie just being like, oh. So definitely not the easiest thing to do. Um, but like I said, at the end of the day, it is still Windows. Windows does rear its head. I just, for instance, so you can do widgets in here, right? So if we open the game bar and we go over here to the widget store, they've got all kinds of little widgets you can get. AMD control panel. And yes, this does work, pretty well with NVIDIA. I haven't noticed any weird issues going on because I have an NVIDIA GPU and not an AMD one. But they have this widget called One Game Launcher, and this is very useful because not only does this allow you to launch your games, but it allows you to add applications to the One Game Launcher, which you can then use to launch these applications in the full screen experience. This is how I have Florp and OBS running here. But anyways, like case of Windows rearing its head, One Game Launcher had an update. I tried to update it from within the full screen experience, and the update like tripped up, wouldn't update. It like got stuck in a loop. So I went to the desktop, and then I had to close the Microsoft Store and then reopen the Microsoft Store and then try to download it like 2 more times before it finally updated. Just classic case of what the fucking Windows. Just a small example of how like it is still Windows at the end of the day. It's a toned back Windows. It's a toned back Windows experience where Windows isn't in your way quite so much, but it's still there, and you will still occasionally have to interact with it whether you want to or not. Whether that's updating your drivers or whatever. So let's talk about how that works. So if we hit the home button, as you can see, we got the Windows desktop option right here. Now when you hit this, boom, we're in Windows desktop, and then here in a minute you're going to see Steam pop up. Steam's set to run on start, which it doesn't run while in the Xbox full screen experience unless I try to run a Steam game, because all my startup programs pretty much get disabled. Where you at, Steam? Let's see if it's already open. I guess it did start, huh? Normally when I go to... That's weird. Normally it always pops up, but I guess it didn't? I don't know. Maybe it already started? Either way. So yeah, moving on. One of the annoying things here about this is that once you go into the Windows desktop, if you try to go back, and go back into the full screen experience, it's going to tell you for optimized performance, your device will restart and then start the full screen experience. You can also start right away. So basically what this is saying is if you want to have the optimized, no desktop environment running in the background type situation, You have to restart your system, which is annoying as shit. Um, it's probably my biggest complaint, to be honest with you, is that I have to do a completely, like, granted my computer reboots pretty quickly and stuff, but still, it's a nuisance to have to reboot your system to go back. And obviously, that's not something you have to do with GameScope. You know, it just logs you out of the desktop environment. But that's because the way that GameScope session works versus KDE Plasma or GNOME, and then the way the Xbox full screen experience works versus, you know, the Windows desktop environment is a bit different, because the Xbox full screen experience is still rooted in the Windows desktop environment. Just a lot of things don't get started until you try to access them. So that's the primary difference. Whereas GameScope Session and, you know, Plasma or GNOME or whatever are completely separate entities that function entirely independent of one another on a Linux system. So that's pretty much the difference between the two philosophies. So this isn't quite as distinct. This is more like Windows desktop, like more of a true like gaming mode for Windows desktop. I don't understand why they couldn't just kill the processes and do it that way. Why they, I guess probably there's probably some kind of like crashing that probably would happen in such a situation. So it's better in their minds. It's just better for you to reboot. I don't know. So yeah, I'm gonna be here for, you know, at least a few days, testing this stuff out and, you know, just gaming on it and seeing how it goes. I'll probably release another video or two of me gaming on it and playing some games on it. And like I said, let me know if you guys want to see a video of me showing this in action and showing how to get this set up. I don't even know if I have any Windows users. I'm sure I do. I'm sure some of you guys use Windows on the side or something. So let me know. Um, Figured we would do something a little bit different today and, you know, uh, talk about some cool tech stuff going on the other side of the fence. Um, I definitely miss my tiling though. I really like just I've just come to just like, you know, I can customize Windows pretty well. Like I know how to do a lot of customizations with it, but it's so much harder than it needs to be to customize Windows versus, you know, Plasma or even GNOME. So it's just annoying. I can't wait to get back to being happily on my Linux distro. But at the same time, I'm trying to enjoy this and take notes. But anyways, guys, that is going to be it for me tonight. I wanted this to be a kind of a short one, just kind of talk about what's going on with me right now and let you guys know, you know, what I've been getting up to. So leave a comment. Until next time.